Hello everyone, welcome to the first Power BI project in this Power BI projects course. The first project, as we already have discussed in the introduction video, is the COVID-19 dataset analysis. We know that it is related to the COVID-19. We have got data about the different countries, the total cases, the new cases that are reported daily, the deaths, and many other information present with us. So we would be analyzing those things in this project. First of all, let us import the dataset. So importing a dataset in Power BI is fairly easy. What we can do is, firstly, we have to know that what is the type of the data set that is available to us. Okay. So if you want, you can go to this get data option and go to more. Now, when you select this more option, you will get a list of the data sources that are supported by Power BI, which is a huge amount of data sources. That means any of the data source that you want, you can directly import the data from that data source, right? So I would be using a very simple Excel workbook. So just select that option and click on connect. Now this will open the folder. You have to select the path. And this is my data set. Click on open. Now you need to wait for a few seconds while Power BI connects to that particular data source. This may take up a few minutes. So once it's done, you will see this kind of a navigator option and the sheets that are available. You can just select the sheet and the preview would be available. This preview would give you a few rows, like 10 to 15 rows, and all the columns that are available in your data set, like this. Now what we want is we can just work on this data. So what do we have here is we can just click on this sheet 1 over here, and we can just see that this data set is unclean because there are these null values present, which we don't want in our data set, right? So we would be transforming this data. So let's just click on this transform data option. Now what will this do? It will open a Power Query editor. This Power Query editor helps us to just make changes into the data set. Like the original data set would not change, but whatever we are getting would be changed, right? So here we have these different columns. First of all, what we are going to do is we are going to drop some columns, right? Like we don't want any of those all the columns that are present here. We just want few columns. So what columns we want? We want the name of the country, that is the location column. We want the date. So whatever columns we want, I'm just going to select those columns. You can just control click to select them. We want total cases and new cases as well. Then we want the column that is the total deaths. Then we want these are these different factors, but most of the values are null, so we cannot use those because they might askew the results a little bit. So we are right now looking at the values that are less, that have more meaningful values and less null values, right? Like we can get this median age, and we can get this. Yeah, I think that would be sufficient. So what we can do is go to this option and select remove other columns, right? So we have got these 6 columns, that is the location, date, total cases, new cases, total deaths, and median age. But as you can see, I applied this operation of removing the columns. So we have got this option written over here as removed other columns, right? But this is a step that we have done. If we want to undo this step, how can we do that? Just click on this cross sign and all these information or all this things that you did would be undone. Okay, so let me just quickly select these columns once again and then we would proceed. I'm also selecting this continents column. Okay, So now I have got these 7 columns. As you can see, the continent, location, date, total cases, new cases, total deaths, and median age. Now the thing is, if you just go to this location, here we have these different kinds of locations that are available, but the information about the date, that is kind of like too much of data is present over here. Like, we have got the dates from 24th February 2020 all the way till yesterday. So there are a humongous amount of records, right? And what kind of data we have is like, if one case was reported in Afghanistan on 24th of February, so that record is present. For few days, no new cases were reported. That is why the total cases record remains the same. But on 3rd March, a new case was reported. That is why a new case has got 1 and total cases has got 2. So there is a huge amount of data that is present. We are not going to work with this data right now. What we are going to do is we are going to filter this data so that we get data from the countries. Like, we don't want to work with the individual data sets, but we want to work with the combined data sets of different countries. So what we are going to do is we are going to apply a filter on the date, right? We can just sort it into the descending order first to get the latest date. This latest date could be anything as per your time that you have downloaded this data set, because this data set is updated daily. So once you have done that, you can just uncheck all and select the latest dataset date, that is 20th July, and click on OK. Now what we would be getting is only the total cases column that is reported on 20th July. That is the total cases that have been reported till 20th July and the new cases that were reported there. Okay, so this is a far more insightful data that we would be working for. Now we can just remove this date column because we don't need it, but we have to keep it because that is the criteria on which the filter is applied. So in this case, what we can do is we can hide it as well, but that is just totally your choice. If you want to hide it, you can hide it. Otherwise, you can just keep it as it is. Okay. Now what we can do is just remove the sorting, just sort it in ascending order, or basically sort it on the basis of cases, or any kind of a sorting you can do. Now one interesting thing that you might have noticed is the presence of few null values in this continents option, right? Like North America, Oceania, etc. So what we are going to do is we have to just remove this null, or just select all and remove this null from here, because these are the few stray values. Like, we are getting the combination of the values. Like for North America, we are getting the combined values of all the countries of North America. So North America is itself a continent, that's why it is not assigned a continent, so the value is null. So we are just removing those values to get just the data of the countries. Why we have done this step? It is because we want to work with this kind of data. Now here also in new cases, total cases and total deaths also, we are getting few null values. What we can do is simply just remove them, because we don't want to work with the countries who are not giving us any single case. We just want to analyze the data of the countries which are giving some cases or some deaths related to COVID, right? So let's just wait for a few seconds, and yeah, that's removed. That's perfect. Okay, like here we can get the total deaths as null, so let's just remove that also, and the median age as well. We can remove the null values, so as to make the data set much more interesting to work with. Yeah, null values are present here as well. So let's just remove these null values. This is the data cleaning part. We have just cleaned the data set from the unclean one that was filled with unnecessary data and null values to a clean data set that is useful for us. Now one thing more that you need to do is you can just change the name of these columns. Like we can provide better names or meaningful names, like continent with a capital C. Instead of location, we can provide like country. We can just keep the date as same, but just keep it a capital. The reason why we are doing this is because when we need to create the visualizations, then these column names would be taken by default. So we don't want these unnecessary underscores and anything else to be present. We want standard names to be shown on the visualizations because they are something that would ultimately go into our reports, right? That is why instead of doing that changes over there multiple times, we have done the changes over here only, and that would save us some precious time while creating the reports, right? Now once you have done all these changes, what you can do is change the name of the sheet. Like I'm changing it to COVID final because this is my final sheet, and here are all the steps that you can see that you have applied over this data set. Once you're satisfied with all these changes, you can go to this option that is close and apply. What will it do? It will just close your Power Query editor and apply the changes into the dataset. Now the changed dataset would be loaded into your Power BI desktop. As you can see, COVID final is being loaded. So you need to wait for a few seconds till this loading is done. After the loading is done, we can start by creating our reports. So what we will do is, first of all, we would be creating a simple visualization, and then we would move on to the reports creation. So let's just wait for a few seconds. Okay, so now the connection has been established, the data is loaded, and you can see this is the COVID final data that has been created. Now we will see how can we work with this data set to create visualizations and then eventually the reports in Power BI.